At Thanksgiving dinner, right as the room settled into warm chatter, my mother looked at me and said, "Why didn't you come to your sister's baby shower?" Her voice carried loud enough for relatives 3 chairs down to turn. Vanessa's eyebrows lifted, amused. A hush swept over the table, everyone waiting for me to break under the question. But I didn't blink. I placed my napkin down slowly, feeling my pulse steady. They assumed I'd stayed home out of spite. They assumed the missing invitations were my fault. They assumed too much. The signature told a different story. My name is Ashley, and if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably pause because they've never taken the time to look closely. I was the quiet kid, the one who blended into doorways, while my older sister Vanessa, 3 years ahead of me, lit up every room simply by walking into it. My mother Helen never meant to draw a line between us, but she did every compliment she gave. Vanessa had a shadow shaped exactly like my name. My father Robert softened the edges when he could, but he spent most of his life avoiding the spotlight and the arguments that came with it. I grew up studying silence the way other kids studied instruments. I could tell what kind of day we'd have just by the sound of Helen's footsteps on the stairs, or how Vanessa dragged out the word "Mom" when she wanted something. I learned early that affection in our house wasn't shared, it was allocated. Still, life has a way of pushing you forward whether you're ready or not. I'm 31 now, living in a modest apartment in Denver, freelancing as a brand designer. My work keeps me home, which I don't mind, especially with my pregnancy. 6 months in, some days feel heavier than others, but I've grown used to carrying weight alone. When I first shared my news, the reaction was polite, pleasant, almost administrative. Helen congratulated me, then immediately shifted to Vanessa's pregnancy like it was the main event, and mine was a supporting act. Vanessa smirked through the call, one hand resting dramatically over her barely visible bump, as if she were starring in a commercial. Robert said he was happy for me, but his eyes flicked toward Helen, waiting for permission to feel the right thing. I told myself not to expect more, and yet I did. Maybe that's why I poured so much of myself into planning my baby shower. I wanted it to be simple, warm something that felt like a welcome into a family I'd spent years trying to belong to. I designed delicate invitations on cream cardstock, wrapped each in ribbon, and brought the stack to the shipping store myself. I triple-checked names and city addresses, making sure no envelope was misplaced. The clerk scanned everything and assured me delivery would be fast. For the first time in a long time, I let myself imagine a room filled with people who were there for me. A week later, when nothing appeared on the tracking page except the same word over and over, signed, I told myself it had to be a glitch, because the alternative felt too familiar. The morning of my baby shower felt strangely bright, the kind of sunlight that makes you believe things might finally go right. I spent hours moving slowly around my apartment, adjusting the string lights, checking the dessert table, making sure the chair cushions were soft enough. Jenna arrived early with a tray of muffins, and that looked the one that tried to be cheerful but carried worry around the edges. I told her not to fuss. I told myself the same thing. By noon, the room smelled like vanilla and citrus cleaner. The music was soft, the decorations gentle, nothing extravagant. I wanted something intimate, something real. I kept glancing at the door whenever the elevator chimed. It wasn't until the second hour passed that I realized I had memorized the sound too well. No one from my family came. Jenna placed a hand on my back when she saw me staring toward the hallway again. "Maybe traffic," she whispered. I nodded, though it wasn't traffic. It wasn't weather. It wasn't anything except the same silence I'd grown up with, just dressed in different clothes. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. The group chat was quiet, the little scene timestamp sitting there like a bruise. Vanessa hadn't written anything all day. Helen and Robert hadn't sent as much as an emoji. I kept swallowing hard, telling myself to smile at the friends who did show up, but every time I blinked, I saw the empty chairs again. When the shower ended, Jenna helped me clean up. She tried to distract me with jokes, but when she left, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than the boxes stacked in the corner. I sank onto the couch, my hands over my stomach, and forced myself to breathe evenly so the baby wouldn't feel my heartbeat racing. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. "Next time, plan earlier, sis. 8 words. No heart emoji, no apology, no question, just condescension so casual it made my jaw tighten. Something was off. Even for her, this was too smooth, too confident. I opened the baby registry to check if maybe they'd at least looked. The line glared back at me, not opened. That's when I remembered the tracking numbers. I pulled up the shipment receipts I'd saved, tapping through each one. Delivered, delivered, delivered. Every invitation marked the same way, and under each status, a new detail I hadn't noticed before, signed for. My pulse kicked. Signed by who I opened the tracking history for the first envelope. There was a signature on file. I blinked, breath stalling in my throat. It looked familiar. Too familiar. My chest tightened as I tapped the download icon for the entire batch. Pages loaded slowly, one signature after another, all written by the same hand, and I already knew whose. I didn't open the signatures right away. I couldn't. I sat there on my couch, staring at the file thumbnails glowing on my screen, my thumb hovering but unmoving. It felt like standing on the edge of something high, knowing the second you lean forward, the world changes. Eventually, I grabbed my keys and walked out, letting the cold Denver air slap the heat out of my face. I ended up at the small diner near my building, the one with flickering neon and chipped red booths. I ordered fries I didn't touch and sat there while the hum of the vent filled the silence. When I finally tapped the first file open, the screen lit with a looping, confident signature. Vanessa. Not a version that looked like hers, not a coincidence her exact handwriting. The same swoop on the V. The same dramatic flourish at the end. The same pressure on the downstroke. A signature I'd seen 1,000 times growing up on permission slips, notebooks, little post-its she used to label things as hers. My throat dried. I opened the next file. Same signature. Next. Same. Next. Same. 12 invitations. 12 identical signatures. She hadn't just intercepted one envelope. She'd taken every single one. I leaned back against the booth, my chest tight. The fries were cold now, untouched. Outside, someone scraped ice off a windshield, the sound harsh and uneven. It grounded me just enough to keep breathing. I pulled up the extended tracking logs and scrolled through timestamps. Every package was delivered to the building where Vanessa lived. Same delivery window, same signature, one after another, precise, intentional, not a mistake. I closed my eyes and flashes of the past rushed through, Helen praising Vanessa for things I did, birthday gifts that must have gotten lost, a Christmas card I'd sent last year that Mom never acknowledged the time I mailed a framed photo and was told it never showed up. All those little disappearances I'd brushed off as accidents. They weren't accidents. I opened a new tab and printed everything, the tracking pages, the signature sheets, the logs. My small printer whirred loudly in my silent apartment, spitting out page after page until they created a neat stack that somehow made my anger feel organized. I slipped everything into a simple folder. No labels, no drama, just truth. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I barely tasted and stared at that folder like it was a living thing. I wasn't scared. I wasn't unsure. I was steady. For the first time in years. Thanksgiving was in a week. This wasn't going to be a scene. It wasn't revenge in the loud, messy way people expect. It was clarity. It was finally refusing to be erased. And when the moment came, I was going to be ready. Thanksgiving always looked the same in my parents' house. Warm, lighting the smell of roasted turkey, relatives crowding the long wooden table. But that evening, as I stepped inside with the folder tucked under my arm, everything felt sharper, clearer, like every sound had been turned up and every emotion stripped of its disguise. Helen spotted me first. "There she is," she said, smiling just wide enough for people to think it meant something. Vanessa glanced over from her seat, one hand resting theatrically on her 7-month belly, as if she were posing for a camera. I took my seat across from them, placing the folder beneath my chair. My pulse stayed steady, my breathing calm. Silence for once belonged to me. Dinner began the usual way, small talk, clinking silverware, my mother bragging about Vanessa's nursery theme while Robert nodded along. I listened the way someone listens to a familiar story they've outgrown. Then it happened. As the room settled into soft conversation, Helen turned toward me and said loud enough for the far end of the table to hear, "Why didn't you come to your sister's baby shower?" The question cut straight through the room. A couple of relatives stopped mid-bite. Vanessa's lips curved not into a smile, but something close. This time, I didn't let the silence swallow me. I folded my napkin neatly and placed it beside my plate. "I had mine too," I said, my voice even. "You were invited." The reaction was instant. A hush rippled across the table. Someone gasped. Robert blinked twice like he hadn't heard me correctly. Helen frowned, offended. "We never got anything." There it was, the line she clung to, the denial she thought would hold. I reached down, pulled the folder from under my chair, and placed it on the table. The soft thud wasn't loud, but it was enough to draw every pair of eyes. "I know," I said. "That's why I brought these." Helen's brows tightened. Vanessa straightened in her seat. A few cousins leaned forward. I opened the folder slowly, the pages whispering against one another. I didn't rush. I didn't perform. I simply laid the first page flat on the table, tracking logs, identical statuses printed down the left margin. "This," I said calmly, "is the delivery history for every invitation I sent." Vanessa scoffed. "Ashley, seriously," I lifted a hand. "Just look." Helen reached for the paper, scanning the first few lines. The confusion on her face didn't last long because the truth was right there. Delivered, delivered, delivered. All to the building where Vanessa lived. "That doesn't prove anything," Vanessa snapped, her voice tightening. I added the second stack of documents, delivery confirmations with timestamps and shipping route details. Then I slid the signature pages across the table like a quiet final card in a game she thought she was winning. I showed the signed 4 packages. The room froze. 12 signature lines, 12 identical loops, 12 confident practice flourishes, 12 of Vanessa. Helen covered her mouth. Robert leaned closer, squinting like the truth was too bright to look at directly. An aunt whispered, "Oh my God." A cousin exchanged a look with his wife. Vanessa's chair scraped the floor as she jerked back. "This is ridiculous. Anyone could have signed." "They could have," I said softly. "But they didn't." I pushed the top sheet toward her. Every signature matched. My sister's. Vanessa's face drained of color. "You're twisting things. You don't know." "I know you didn't want me to have a baby shower that mattered," I replied, still calm. "I know you intercepted every invitation. I know my family didn't ignore me. They simply never had the chance to show up." Robert's jaw clenched. "Vanessa," he said carefully, "why would you Dad stop?" She snapped, her voice rising. "She's making this dramatic. She always does this. She's jealous." I shook my head. "This isn't jealousy. This is your signature on 12 separate deliveries." Helen rounded on Vanessa, her voice trembling. "Did you do this? Tell me right now." Vanessa's breathing grew fast, erratic. Her hands shook. "You always take her side when she plays the victim. She's had everything so easy while I almost laughed at that. Almost easy. My voice didn't rise, but something in it sharpened. "You mean growing up invisible? You mean every accomplishment I earned turning into a conversation about you? You mean hosting a baby shower alone and wondering if my own family hated me that much?" The room held its breath. Robert rubbed his forehead. "Vanessa, this isn't right." Helen was still staring at the signatures, her face cracking in real time. "I can't believe... I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said quietly. "But I'm not here to fight. I'm here to stop pretending this didn't happen." Vanessa pushed her chair back again, her voice wobbling. "You're trying to embarrass me. You planned this." "I didn't plan your actions," I answered. Just the moment I stopped letting them stay hidden. Something in the room shifted then. Relatives who had always viewed me as the quiet one began looking at me differently, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. And when they turned to Vanessa, the usual admiration wasn't there. It was something colder, sharper, something earned. Vanessa stood abruptly, tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm done with this," she snapped. "I don't deserve to be ambushed while pregnant." She stormed away from the table, one hand gripping the edge of her chair for balance as she pushed past a relative who flinched out of her way. Silence settled again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It wasn't mine to carry. Helen lowered her gaze, unable to look at me. Robert exhaled slowly like the truth had been sitting on his chest for years. I gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. I didn't need applause. I didn't need anyone to side with me. The truth had already done what it needed to do. For the first time that night, I felt air fill my lungs without resistance. No shouting, no drama, just clarity. And as I stood to leave, I realized something else. Exposure wasn't the revenge. Finally, being heard was. The house felt different after Vanessa stormed out like someone had opened a window and let all the noise drain into the cold. Relatives shifted in their seats, murmuring in low voices, avoiding eye contact with Helen, who sat frozen at the head of the table. The pride she wore so effortlessly just an hour ago had slipped, replaced by something far more fragile. She kept glancing at the door as if Vanessa might reappear and undo everything with a single breath. But the evidence still lay in front of her, and she couldn't outrun it. Robert cleared his throat, a hesitant sound in the quiet room. He walked over to me, stopping just a step away. "Ashley," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I should have noticed. I should have asked questions." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was the kind that came from a man who had carried silence like a shield his whole life. It was enough. I picked up the folder and held it against my side. I didn't need to explain anything further. I didn't need them to agree or defend or repair what had already cracked. My worth didn't hinge on their understanding. "I'm going home," I said, keeping my voice steady. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. Some relatives nodded at me, small gestures, but genuine ones. Helen looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Maybe someday she would, maybe not. Either way, I wasn't waiting for permission to feel whole. I stepped outside into the cold evening, the air crisp and honest, and for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like mine. The house felt different after Vanessa stormed out like someone had opened a window and let all the noise drain into the cold. Relatives shifted in their seats, murmuring in low voices, avoiding eye contact with Helen, who sat frozen at the head of the table. The pride she wore so effortlessly just an hour ago had slipped, replaced by something far more fragile. She kept glancing at the door as if Vanessa might reappear and undo everything with a single breath. But the evidence still lay in front of her, and she couldn't outrun it. Robert cleared his throat, a hesitant sound in the quiet room. He walked over to me, stopping just a step away. "Ashley," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I should have noticed. I should have asked questions." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was the kind that came from a man who had carried silence like a shield his whole life. It was enough. I picked up the folder and held it against my side. I didn't need to explain anything further. I didn't need them to agree or defend or repair what had already cracked. My worth didn't hinge on their understanding. "I'm going home," I said, keeping my voice steady. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. Some relatives nodded at me, small gestures, but genuine ones. Helen looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Maybe someday she would, maybe not. Either way, I wasn't waiting for permission to feel whole. I stepped outside into the cold evening, the air crisp and honest, and for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like mine. I walked to my car with the folder tucked under my arm, the cold air biting just enough to remind me I was finally standing on my own. Families fall apart in 1,000 tiny ways, but sometimes they reveal themselves in one sharp moment. One question, one signature, one truth no one can bury. I didn't win anything tonight. I simply stopped losing. And that was enough. If you've ever felt erased by the people who were supposed to show up for you, tell me your story below. And don't forget to subscribe for the next one.